Hello, YouTube. Today I'm bringing you another debate, commentary on the debate. I like this format because, uh, they're exchanging ideas. That sort of stimulates me to think about things, triggers my thought processes, and I think it's an interesting format. Anyway, today we've got Vaush, who, if you don't know who he is, he's sort of a pretty legendary politics streamer. He's a socialist. Um, but also sort of a centrist, supporter of the DNC. Um, yeah, and then we've got the ANCAP color. Let's get right into it.
Just right off the bat, I have some disagreements with you on like anarchism, specifically like market socialism and free market systems, and like how you advocate for like universal health care. Like
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I also wanted to try to maybe discuss some of the things you said about like,
I actually think that within a libertarian system, we would see universal health care. It's just that it would be mostly charity for the indigent or people who couldn't afford, or more of a like a pay what you can system for the working poor. But I think everybody would get some treatment, even though people might be able to pay to get better treatment than other people. It wouldn't necessarily be equal, but it would be universal in the sense that everybody would have some access to healthcare.
like private regulation with Demon Mama. Like, oh god, I have no idea how long ago that was. Just like maybe have a discussion, that'd be great. So if you could maybe just like outline your position, like on why you support uh, universal health care or like single payer system, or like what exactly it is you
What is your
support here.
what is your political ideology again?
Oh boy. We're just gonna keep it at market anarchist. I mostly identify with like free market systems,
So,
like abolition.
and cap?
No. I don't think that anarcho-capitalism is. I don't think it's. Like, I think it's self-contradictory because the Lockean conception of property rights says that, like, transformative. It's theory stuff. Says that transformative labor is what is required to create property, and then if you go through the whole process of like how anarcho-capitalism or like capitalism works, the organization of property under capitalism leads to a contradiction in the entire principles of property itself, which is from Proudhon.
All right,
So
no and cap could ever give an answer that protracted. Okay, gotcha. You've proved you're not one. Sorry, pulling your leg a little. What specific things would you like me to answer for?
I would just like how, like, if you're like a libertarian socialist or like a libertarian in general, why do you often argue for like statism? Like why would you say that
An excellent question.
it's better, for example, to have like universal health care where um, it doesn't really solve the problem. It doesn't really like eliminate monopoly that is the root of the problem of like why prices are so high for health insurance. It all it really does is spread out the cost.
Yeah, this guy's definitely an ANCAP in disguise.
All it really does is take the cost of
I'm with Chad on this one.
healthcare. It keeps it monopolized. It keeps intellectual property rights. It still
Because
stops worker.
I
Okay, go
don't
ahead.
I don't like advocating stateless societies as a solution to any problems we face, because all of us will be dead before a stateless society is viable and stable. That is a very long-term goal. Democracy was conceptualized millennia.
I'm with Vosh here. I think that it's important to look at intermediary steps, so long as we hold the long term goal as our long term goal. We can't ignore it, but we should look at transitioning programs. We should look at what's politically possible today.
Before we actually got something approximating one. I'm okay with that. That's fine. Improvements can still
But
be made.
on the other hand, and this is a contradiction with libertarian socialism, if your goal is to eliminate the state, then you should be looking to eliminate the state, at least partially. Whereas programs like socialized medicine are expanding the state. So if your goal is to eliminate the state, why are you expanding the state?
Made. That's life. I do think that stuff can be made in the direction of workers' ownership and decommodification, however. In the case of healthcare, the problem is that healthcare is an inelastic good. A person will pay any amount of money to not die.
A person will pay any amount of money to not starve, or will pay any amount of money to have shelter. These things will kill you sooner than not having healthcare will. That's why price is determined by supply and demand. Even in the case of an unconscious patient or medical surgery that has to be done right now, the price of these things can still be negotiated and set in advance, in particular with insurance companies. You know, a lot of libertarians talk about how, oh, we're not advocating for the American system or whatever. But I think part of the problem is just that, you know, healthcare to the standard and quality of the American system is just really expensive. That's just all there is to it. You're paying all these doctors and nurses salaries. You know, you want all this fancy equipment. You want to be able to handle any problem. Well, that all costs money. And yes, at the end of the day, the consumer's got to foot the bill. There's just no way around that. Now, there are reforms that can make things cheaper, allowing for a greater supply of doctors. So this article here shows that the AMA has been working to artificially constrain the supply of doctors. For example, they shut down a number of medical schools in the early 20th century. They limit the number of physicians that can be trained in each state. 2/3 of highly qualified medical school applicants are turned away each year. So a simple solution would just be to eliminate the sort of cap on the number of doctors you can have, and to allow more medical schools to be built to train all these promising medical students that can't find a place within the number of schools that exist today. So today there are 155 medical schools in the USA. In 1906, there was 162. You also have an issue of a limited number of residency spots.
Meaning that the normal forces of market regulation are not very effective at determining a good cost for healthcare. So I'm okay.
I think he's demonstrated the case for why the market mechanism here is any different from anywhere else. Healthcare is not the only thing that people need.
Commodification and decommodification in the context of a stated society usually correlates to state ownership, which I'm very much.
And then to leap onto a state monopoly of healthcare, there's just no argument for that. When you have a state monopoly, you're going to have inferior outcomes. You're going to have higher prices, lower quality, because there's no competition between firms to ensure that you have efficiency.
Okay, so I understand that the demand for healthcare is inelastic, but you can still change healthcare prices by decreasing its scarcity, right?
So back when healthcare was a free market in America, you can see that the costs were rising roughly in line with the consumer price index. It's only, towards the 70s and the 80s when you have more government intervention, more regulation, Medicare and Medicaid, when you have the government get involved and start paying for healthcare services, then the price goes through the roof because now there's less incentive to keep costs down. The government's footing the bill. People don't care about the price when the government's paying. So when you have artificial restrictions on supply, like a limited number of medical schools or a limited number of residencies, when you have government regulations intervening in the market, for example, Obamacare, which forces insurers to cover pre-existing conditions, meaning that the cost of premiums for healthy people go up, yes, you're going to see cost increase. Another component of medical costs is patents on drugs, which is basically a grant of monopoly privilege from the state to that manufacturer, that drug company. And yeah, that's going to drive the price up again. That's why I oppose patents and IP law and would eliminate that special privilege.
And might not change, but you can do certain policies, right, that don't necessarily mean it's anarchism, that will reduce prices of, like, drastically. For example, we
Like
could...
price caps.
Or we could do things like the abolition
No, price controls don't work. They lead to shortages.
of intellectual property rights, which will force these companies to compete with each other, reducing the scarcity and the price of the good. And
Why
we
would a
could also add,
pharmaceutical company ever get on board with the abolition of intellectual property if it meant they could spend billions doing drug trials and the nanosecond theirs gets FDA approved, every single other company that sells drugs just find
Well, you're not asking them to get on board with it. It's the government that controls IP laws, not Big Pharma.
one pill, breaks it down in the lab, and then reproduces.
okay, why do we care what the companies want, though?
Because
like, aren't we
they're the ones-
socialists?
Because in this instance, with a commodified healthcare system, they're the ones producing the drugs. As long as they're the ones producing the drugs, they do need to have an incentive to produce the drugs.
Okay, they
Always funny when leftists argue that the profits of Big Pharma should be enshrined in law. What sort of twisted position is that for a libertarian socialist? I mean, even if it were true that drug trials can continue absent IP laws, that this led to a slowdown in the production of new drugs, which I don't think it would. I'll get to that in a second, but who cares? The resources that would have been invested in producing new drugs don't just disappear. They would go somewhere else. They would be producing more housing or more factories, creating more jobs in other areas of the economy, depending on consumer demand. So it wouldn't matter. But secondly, the main breakthroughs are going to come from scientists, people that study this stuff. It's not like you can just spend $1 billion and get a new drug. That's not how research works. So as long as we still have scientists studying pharmacology, we're going to get new drug breakthroughs. It's also the issue of the FDA approvals driving up the cost.
still have an incentive to produce the drugs because it's what makes them money, right? Like even if it's a workers' cooperative, right? They're still going to have an incentive to produce the drug because that's.
You also have first mover benefits. They can build brand recognition. They can use trade secrets.
The service they provide.
Yeah, but they wouldn't want to invest billions into R&D because there would be no return on it the moment they came out with the drug after spending.
Again, that money would just be invested somewhere else in the economy.
Billions on it. Every other company would immediately replicate that drug identically.
To the degree that this phenomenon is existing, it's a misallocation of resources. There's artificial consumer demand being created here.
And there would be no specific return. Okay, yeah,
That
sure.
would reduce price.
This is what Bastia was talking about when he said you have to see the seen and the unseen.
Okay, no, but then they wouldn't do R&D because they never get a return on their development. They would all just wait for the other companies to invent these drugs and then copy them immediately after they're produced.
So you don't think that there would be an incentive for people to innovate under this system, but yet you argue for a system that doesn't even have like market forces, which also doesn't really provide an incentive for people to innovate.
Yes, it
like
does.
For an example, so for well, actually,
Most
let me
R&D is done by student researchers and stuff at like
Just proving my point.
universities.
Yes, I work in R&D. I'm
Most research is done by students, by scientists, so you don't need the billions of dollars.
a chemist. I work in R&D as a chemical lab technician. Most R&D is conducted by simple workers that are paid money. right? It doesn't really cost too much to just pay a worker to do R&D.
Wait, R&D costs a lot. The
Yes,
full,
depending on the industry.
yeah,
But like
for
a worker,
pharmaceuticals.
most workers are the ones that come up with R&D, right? Like it's not like
Yes, but it
it's not like
costs
the
a lot.
capitalist. I don't see why that matters when they make a lot, right? Like, because in this society where like the maximization of competition within a labor market brings the product of brings the what are we going to call this, the worker's wage up.
But
It's
none of
the
these companies would want to
labor.
spend the billions for no return. There's no reason for any private company to invest money in R&D if there's a guarantee that it would immediately be copied by every other R&D
So
or
so
every
are
other
you
pharma company.
so are you arguing in favor of intellectual property rights then?
In the context of a privatized market, yes.
Another big component of the healthcare costs in America are the outrageous prices charged by drug companies when they have a drug under patent. And a lot of the times, this isn't necessarily a drug that has been newly created, but simply some minor superficial alteration or some changes in the clinical data, the testing, and then they've reacquired a patent for it. This problem is compounded by the large amount of government spending involved in American healthcare because Medicaid can foot the bill for these drugs, paying obscene prices that no consumer could ever pay because they're the government. So I disagree with Vaush's whole line of reasoning here. I think that you eliminate the patent system. Big Pharma is still going to be fine. They're still going to be able to make profit simply by producing and selling drugs. Maybe the total amount invested in R&D goes down. Maybe they have to target their R&D to the most efficacious ends. It's that doesn't really matter because those funds would be just reinvested somewhere else in the economy, at some other sector. They're not going to just disappear. That wealth isn't going to disappear. If investment in pharmaceutical research goes down, the investment in some other enterprise or research somewhere else will go up. I mean, it's just perplexing to me that you have supposed leftists who are shilling for massive corporations, big pharma. Makes absolutely zero sense until you realize that these people are just reflexively defending the status quo with no real analysis or thought on their end.
Commodified pharmaceutical system, in which case it would be
So
irrelevant.
so it wouldn't necessarily be like private ownership, right? These would be worker cooperatives, right? We're not talking like it's going to be, and we
They're
would
still
have
motivated
like
by profit.
profit is absorbed by wages.
Yeah, but and they get more wages if they make a return. If they spend billions on R&D, that's billions coming out of a worker cooperative's budget. Any market-based entity needs a market incentive in order for them to invest in the development of a new product, which is why I want this to be done in a decommodified fashion by the government, because the government has different incentives for producing pharmaceuticals.
Here again, a so-called libertarian socialist wants to eliminate the government, ergo, let's put the government in charge of all research. But there's a big problem with state-directed research. It's necessarily bureaucratic. Anytime you have a top-down model, you're going to end up with decisions being made not in the interest of the research, but in the interest of the bureaucracy. When research is funded primarily by the private sector, it's directed towards consumer demand, towards making things that people want. Whereas government research is based upon political expediency, what's popular. Historically, the role of the independent inventor, the tinkerer in his garage, has been extremely important in technological development. And the larger and more bureaucratic an organization or a research team, the more dead weight there is, the more people there are just milling around. A government-directed research is necessarily without regard to the market or the price signals, so there's no real guide to make sure that the research is going in the right direction.
The government has spent a lot of money on R&D because it can. The government invests because it has adjacent military projects that it wants to, build up. or because there are just government researchers who get money and they can just use that to do R&D. But the government gets its money not from selling products, but from taxes, meaning that you don't have to worry about like restrictive IP access to the things produced through government research. They'll just do stuff on their own.
In other words, government researchers don't have to have an actual goal that's going to help consumers, but they can just go off on whatever direction they want. The research doesn't have to be directed towards productive ends. Just as a general rule, things work better when you have decentralization. Decentralized organizations are more agile. When somebody has an idea, they can pick up the ball and run with it. Whereas in a larger organization, when you have more of a top-down structure with the power at the top, and then they're giving the orders and they're just sort of following through towards the bottom, you don't have that flexibility, that dynamism. And it's not even necessarily about private versus public or worker versus market economy, but simply decentralization versus monolithic centralized model. Einstein was sort of a lone thinker, not an inventor, but a lone scientist. He said, "I am a horse for single harness, not cut out for teamwork." St. Giorgio, who discovered vitamins, wrote, "The real scientist is ready to bear privation rather than let anyone dictate to him which direction his work must take." So that emphasizes the importance of having decentralized models where you have individuals or very small teams that are able to pursue their own objectives without top-down control, without some bureaucrat dictating to them what area their research should go under, because that's what's politically expedient. The nature of science is that it's unpredictable. You can't tell in advance what areas are going to make breakthroughs. That's why you need these individual scientists pursuing their own theories and explanations of the world. Whereas, if you have to apply for a research grant and then follow through on that grant and that testing, and the whole process is bureaucratic, you have to get approval from the government, you have to wait for that approval, and you have to make sure that you're going in an area that's sort of accepted or not too controversial, because you want the approval from the bureaucrat. And the free enterprise system, the free market economy, is much more hospitable to these individual inventors who can create something of value that they can sell in the marketplace than government controlled science is. With government controlled science, it's all about the process, it's all about the bureaucracy and the decisions from up on high.
So, okay, wait. So you're saying that you would prefer a system where the government, right, takes money from people's work, like the value of their labor, right, uses it
Taxes.
to fund, which is exploitation, and
I
then
don't think
uses
taxes
it.
are exploitation.
How so? It's extraction from one's labor value.
Because taxes are how we have society, and I like.
No, taxes are how we have government. The state and society are not the same thing. You can have a society without the state. You can have, interactions in the market economy. You can still have friends and live in a city with people. That does not necessitate the existence of a state, especially once you realize that things like the rule of law, policing, courts, roads, these can all be provided by the market economy. So the state and society, these are different things. The state is an organization. Society is everybody in a geographic area. It's a fallacy to equate the two.
Society.
Okay, well.
And again, I thought Vaush was a libertarian socialist opposed to the state.
Exploitation.
Exploitation has a definitively negative context. There are implicit bits of exploitation in all forms of extraction and transaction. When I'm talking about, like, taxes aren't exploitation, I mean you're not getting a raw deal. tax.
You're absolutely getting a raw deal, which is why they have to threaten you with violence in order to get you pay your taxes. Look, when you spend your money on your own stuff, you spend it on your highest order goods, the stuff that'll bring you the largest amount of utility. First you might pay your rent, then you might buy your groceries, then you pay your bills, then maybe you go to the movies, then you take a vacation, and so on and so forth. So that's going to go to the stuff that you most directly want, that will give you the greatest amount of happiness or the largest amount of utility satisfaction. When the government spends your money on you, they're completely ignorant of your value scales, and B, even if they knew them, they wouldn't care. They're spending on stuff that's politically expedient. Even in the case of something like healthcare and education, where it's stuff you might value. Maybe you don't have a kid, right? But maybe you do. Even if it's stuff that you value, then it's still not your highest priority, and often you will have higher priorities than that you'll have to go without. But a lot of the money they spend is on stuff that isn't productive, on the salaries of bureaucrats who are pushing paper around. When they hire IRS agents to harass you, to audit you, to go through, every little financial transaction you've made for the last 5 years. That's not in your interest. That's diametrically opposed to your interest. Or when they go to war overseas, when they engage in bellicose acts of aggression overseas, not only is that not in your interest, that's directly against your interest. Now they're inciting hatred against you, using your money to do so, committing unjust acts overseas, murdering people, engaging in aggression. Or when the government constructs elaborate spying apparatuses to spy on the people, that's a violation of our civil liberties. That's not something anybody would ever pay for. Nobody wants to be in the panopticon, and yet here we are with our government spying on us, and the regulatory regime that destroys production and can make some marginal businesses. If you have a business that's marginally profitable, but they have to comply with all these regulations and red tape, and that costs them more money, and now they have to go out of business. That can absolutely happen. The same with the taxes on the business. Other policies like the minimum wage, which prevent low-skilled workers from finding a job, and the enforcement of such. Or when the government drowns economic development in red tape. For example, in Canada, there's lots of potential mining operations that want to get going, but because the government has to kowtow to environmentalists and leftist groups, they delay these operations. They make them unviable, and that's hurting the economy. That's hurting the taxpayer. Even you look at police, they're waging a war on drugs. So that's a war on the population. That's a war on the citizenry, and that's caused tremendous damage to our civil rights, to our civil liberties. That's again the government spying on us, and they're doing no-knock warrants and no-knock raids, and people are getting shot. Maybe more so in the States than Canada. I'm sure they do it here too. Just the very idea that the police have the right to come barging in, guns blazing, and we're not even safe in our own homes. Or the lavish salaries and lifestyles of bureaucrats and politicians. So absolutely we're getting a raw deal. And there's a huge moral hazard here when it comes to taxation and government spending, in that because they don't need your consent, they can take the money and spend it on whatever they want. Whereas, at least in the market economy, if a firm is not giving you a good deal, you can at least say, okay, I'll go somewhere else. I will take my money to a competitor. So there is that check in the market economy that is not present with government spending.
Taxes are good. A non
I, I
non
would argue that
the non
taxes are theft.
I don't really care if they're I don't care. They're a good thing. I'm glad they happen. The absence of taxes means the absence of society. And
No, no, absolutely not. I mean, just look at the 19th century America. There was still a society. Okay, there were taxes, but they were very, very low compared to today.
absence of society means like ooga booga, warlord, rape everyone. So I'm okay with the taxes being around.
It's not taxes that give us uh, society or that prevent us from the ooga booga war of all against all that Hobbes posited. That's general respect for property rights, general respect for each other. You can have that again without the state. You can have the rule of law and police without the state. It's not really the state that does that causes us to live in a civilized manner. It's a general philosophy on the part of the public that, hey, we shouldn't be hurting each other. Hey, we're decent people. And I think any society, the majority of the people are decent or wouldn't be able to function.
Even like
And again, this is just a weird argument for a so-called anarchist to be making. I mean, if you believe this, then why do you want to abolish the state?
stated anarchist government would have to do something along the lines of collecting
What are you talking about, anarchist government? There is no government in an anarchist society.
a tax or tax equivalent. I don't think you can get around that.
So, why do you think that people can't organize society in such a way to where back okay. Anyways, back to the healthcare example. I would like to talk about a healthcare system that existed previously, like they're called friendship societies, right? And it was more based on a free market system that had more consumer cooperative based solutions for insurance, right? Why is it that now a worker, right, had to pay? Now they have to pay. Back then, a single day of wage for a worker, I can provide the study, a single day working of a worker's wage just for a single day of working was able to provide them for an entire year's worth of full coverage health care for friendship societies, because they basically formed basically what's called a consumer cooperative. But now it's like, I think any worker could ever possibly pay for their entire years of health insurance with just a single days of wage.
I don't think this is a relevant argument. You're talking about completely incomparable factors. Not only am I not familiar with the specific ways in which healthcare was accommodated by these programs, I don't know what they could or couldn't do. I don't know the limits. I don't know what the weights were. There's nothing for me to derive here. And it's also irrelevant to the point that was being made, which is about the incentive for innovation in the healthcare industry. And I was saying that IP laws are necessary in order for private investment to be a worthwhile endeavor, but public investment happens without.
In fact, there's a strong case to be made that eliminating IP would make entrepreneurs and businesses even more innovative because they can no longer sit back and rest on their IP grant of monopoly privilege. If they want to make a profit, they have to keep innovating, keep delivering a better product. Sure, their competition can copy it and bring it to market next year, but by next year, you'll have already made it better, made it more effective, eliminated some side effects, etc. Furthermore, during the time that a drug is under IP, there's no real incentive for competitors to tinker with it, improve it, make it more efficient, because they can't bring it to market right away. Whereas without IP, now any company in the world can work on improving this drug and finding ways to make it better. Also, big drug companies do very little actual innovation. It's mostly done by smaller firms, and the cost to discover a new drug is actually quite marginal.